Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first annual CSU Bakersfield Grad Slam competition. My name is Deborah Jackson, and I'm honored to serve as the Associate Dean of Graduate and Undergraduate Studies at CSUB. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you a bit about this afternoon's event. Starting in 2017, the Western Association of Graduate Schools began hosting an annual Grad Slam, sometimes also referred to as a 3MT or 3-minute thesis competition. During the competition, master's and doctoral students present their research to a general audience in 3 minutes and with one PowerPoint slide, much like you would expect from a series of mini TED Talk presentations. Last spring, I attended the 3rd annual Grad Slam competition held in Tucson, Arizona, and I got to see nearly 24 students from Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, North Dakota, Utah, New Mexico, as well as CSU campuses compete for cash prizes, bragging rights, and an opportunity to compete in a national competition. Today, we find out who among our many impressive graduate students at CSU Bakersfield will represent us at the 4th annual WAGS Grad Slam competition. This decision will be made by an esteemed panel of judges, all of which are alumni of CSU Bakersfield's graduate programs. I'd like to introduce each of them to you. Mr. Jeremy Adams is a Bakersfield High School civics teacher, best known as the founder of the Earl Warren Cup Constitutional Competition, the Super Bowl of local school competitions. He's published 2 books, one of which, The Secrets of Timeless Teachers, has been widely used by public school districts in California. He's written for the Washington Post, C-SPAN, The Educator's Room, and the Huffington Post. Over the years, Jeremy has been recognized many times for his outstanding contributions to the field of education. He's been named Kern County Teacher of the Year by the Kern County Superintendent of Schools Office, and California Teacher of the Year by the Daughters of the American Revolution. He was a semifinalist for California Teacher of the Year by the California Board of Education, and he was a finalist for the Carlson Family Foundational National Teacher Award. Jeremy earned his Master's in Master of Arts in Education from CSUB in 2000 and was inducted into the CSUB Alumni Hall of Fame in 2018. A small token of thanks for Jeremy.
Thanks.
Thank you. Our second judge is Ms. Cheryl Chalupa. She recently retired as President and Chief Executive Officer of Goodwill Industries of South Central California after nearly 19 years of service. Before joining Goodwill, she served as Director of Membership Services and then Executive Director of Girl Scouts Joshua Tree Council, go Girl Scouts, and was appointed to the State Compensation Insurance Fund Board of Directors by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. She's a member of the Bakersfield Rotary Club and has served on the boards of the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce, Kern County Economic Development Foundation, and West Side Energy Services and Education Center. Cheryl earned a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from CSUB in 1995 and a Master in Public Administration from CSUB in 2005. She served as President of CSUB's Alumni Board, as a member of CSUB's Council of 100, the Public Policy and Administration Advisory Board, and the CSUB Foundation Board. And she's taught for the public administration programs at CSUB for over 9 years. Cheryl was inducted into the CSUB Alumni Hall of Fame in 2010. And I have a small token of thanks for you as well. Thank you. Our final guest judge is Ms. Debbie Wood. She's worked for more than 30 years in the nursing profession, including with Mercy Hospital, the Kern County Public Health Department, Delano Union School District, and the Bakersfield City School District. Debbie's dedicated herself to ensuring the health and well-being of local children. She wrote grants, created community partnerships, and worked with state legislators to secure funding for the Bakersfield City School District to establish health centers for its 30,000 students, a large percentage of whom are uninsured or underinsured. She implemented annual eye exam clinics for elementary students throughout Kern County, working with optical companies, doctors, and nonprofit organizations. She was also a driving force behind the Healthy Start Collaborative at the Bakersfield City and Delano Union School Districts, helping families overcome barriers to learning and school attendance. Debbie earned her Bachelor of Science in Nursing from CSUB in 1982 and her MA in Education from CSUB in 2000. She's taught in the CSUB nursing program for nearly 20 years and was inducted into the CSUB Alumni Hall of Fame in 2018. Thank you, Debbie. To prepare for today's competition, most of the competitors participated in one or more workshops facilitated by 3 community members, Jacqueline Jans, Shannon LeBaire, and Maddie Jansen. I'd like to publicly thank them for their time and expertise. I'd also like to thank several staff members from the Graduate Student Center and ITS Support Services, Martha Manriquez, Brenda Mendez, Denise Silva, James Evans, Mike Bohan, and Ernie Hashem. Finally, I'd like to thank the graduate program faculty who served on the Grad Slam Application Review Committee, Dr. Chandra Kamuri, Dr. Christina Legou, Dr. Yvonne Ortiz-Bush, and Dr. Marianne Parada. For those of you who have just come in, if you'd like to have a seat. Yeah? Okay. You want to drink something? So as we get started with our presentations, we will try to guard the door a bit so that the opening and closing doesn't interrupt us as we go. Other than that, we're ready to begin. Our first presenter is Viviana Castro. Her presentation is The Effect of Drought on Water Transport Within Plants. She's earning her Master of Science in Biology, and her advisor is Dr. Brandon Pratt.
Do you mind if I dim the lights?
Let me do it for you.
Just so you can see my slide. Climate change has many negative effects on ecosystems and the organisms within these ecosystems. Because of climate change, we have seen an increased severity in drought, and as a result, have seen the loss of many plants. In the United States, for example, we have seen the loss of millions of acres of forest land, and conditions are continuing to worsen. Plants are exceptionally vulnerable to drought because of its effect on the water transport system. So think about how you and I drink water from a straw. Plants use negative pressure to sip water from their roots through their water transporting cells to feed their thirsty leaves. This function during drought can be very devastating to plants because it can lead to gas bubbles forming within the plant. And these gas bubbles will eventually block all water flow through the plant and can result in the death of the plant. So my research uses a functional and mechanistic approach to understand these gas bubbles, to understand how they're forming, how they're spreading, and what drought is going to imply for these gas bubbles. So I'm using X-ray imaging, as you can see, to image plants while they're alive and functioning. And this is a research method that is new and exciting in the field of plant hydraulics. And so my picture on the left is a scan that I've done of Cercocarpus vegetuloides, and the orange represents the gas bubbles that are forming in this plant. And so this image is really interesting because this plant right here actually hasn't been exposed to drought, It's been well watered all its life. So I want to understand, how are these gas bubbles forming? That's in this 3D image. In the 2D image of that same plant in that same section, I am looking at those gas bubbles before drought has occurred, so those same 3 orange gas bubbles, and I want to see them after drought has occurred and the new gas bubbles have formed, which are the blue gas bubbles. And so what's very interesting about this is that I have found that because of drought, there are so many gas bubbles forming. So you're going from 3 gas bubbles to over 50. And so you can imagine how this will eventually block all flow of water in the plant and will eventually kill those plants. So my research is very exciting, and I am looking forward to finding out more things so I can understand what plants are surviving during drought, and more importantly, what plants will die because of it. Thank you.
Next, we have J.C. Pickle. Her presentation, Vascular Structure and Hydraulic Function of the Stems and Roots of Shrubs, is her work in the Master of Science in Biology program, and her advisor is Anna Jacobson.
So water transport in plants occurs in the xylem tissue of these plants, or what you could think of as the wood. And within the xylem tissue are vessels, which you can think of as the pipes through which water flows. So water transport occurs when plants are losing water to the atmosphere through their leaves. This creates a negative pressure or a suction all the way down into their roots. And it pulls water and nutrients in from their roots all the way up into the plant. However, in times of drought, gases can be pulled into these vessels. Or in times of freezing events, these gases can come out of solution, and then when the plants thaw, these bubbles can coalesce and form these larger bubbles of air. And this is bad because it cuts off water transport in the plants. For my project, I am looking at 5 native shrubs to the Lake Isabella area, and here is one of my sites. And I am comparing the roots and the stems of these plants. This is an interesting comparison because by comparing both the roots and the stems, I'm able to tease apart some of the differences that occur during drought and during freezing events, because the soil buffers the roots from freezing. Also, there's not a lot of information on roots currently, because as you can see, they're very difficult to access, and I spent my summer digging them up with the help of lots of other graduate students. So far, I have found that roots, which is this line on the graph, at least for one species, are more vulnerable to these gas bubbles occurring than to the stems. So in conclusion, roots are different from stems, and this can tell us some interesting information about how plants respond to stress, and also how they will respond when considering climate change in California. Thank you.
Our third presenter is Samuel Loudon. His presentation is titled, Don't Eat Me, Anti-Predator Responses in the Rough-Skinned Newt. He's finishing his Master of Science in Biology with Dr. Amber Stokes.
For an adult human, a fatal dose of tetrodotoxin, or TTX, is 1/2 to 2 milligrams. For context, think of a paper clip, split it into about 1,000 equally sized pieces, take one of those pieces, and that would be the same mass as your fatal dose. It should come as little surprise then that this toxin is evolved in animals to be a useful predator deterrent. My study animal, the rough-skinned newt, secretes tetrodotoxin in response to predation threat, and it's part of a well-studied coevolutionary relationship with its TTX-resistant predator, the garter snake. However, it's been observed as the prey species for a number of other non-resistant predator species, including otter species and several bird species. So it's all well and good to be really, really toxic, but if a new predator comes along that's never interacted with this newt before and it ingests one, it may not know that it's toxic until, well, the predator dies. And at that point, it's a little bit too late for our little newt friends to escape unscathed or even at all. That's why the Unken reflex, pictured here, is such a crucial part of predator interaction for this newt. Note the bright coloration on its underside in comparison to the drab coloration on its back. This contrast in coloration in combination with the shape that it's in should shout to visual predators, hey, I'm toxic. And you can imagine that a newt in that conformation would be a little bit more difficult to swallow. The questions that drive my research ask how this newt will respond to its predators given differing environmental and stress conditions. In one series of tests, I'm allowing these newts to acclimate to temperatures within their active range, about 10 to 20 degrees Celsius, simulating predatory interaction and then seeing how their unkin reflex changes across that temperature range. In another series of tests, I'm going to expose them to varying levels of chemical cues from their resistant predator, the garter snake, and see how they respond. In yet another series of tests, I plan to simulate a bird predator flying overhead, as well as using a live garter snake, don't worry, I won't let them eat the newts, to see how these newts respond to visual predatory cues. And while all this is going on, I'm actively collecting newt stress hormones in order to tease apart the stress responses. Now, you might be asking why I spend so much time studying this tiny newt. Well, ecosystems form as a result of the relationships that species form with each other and their environment. And as global climate changes, we can expect that the foundation for previously stable ecosystems will change as well. Ecosystems are also constantly changing as species evolve, interact in novel ways, and vie for resources. So any relationship that's not well understood, say between a really toxic newt and a non-resistant bird predator, is ripe for study and can provide really useful information as to how these communities form and will persist over time. But really, who wouldn't want to study these cuties? Thank you.
Our fourth presenter is Katya McEvoy. Her presentation is titled The Meaning of Creativity Using a Cultural Lens. Katya is studying for her master's in science and counseling psychology with Dr. Richard Zamora.
How many of you have seen any of the Disney live action movies? You know the ones. They take a classic Disney movie like Cinderella and then they just add a ton of special effects. Before I became the researcher that you see here today, I dabbled into script writing. And let me tell you, in that world, those movies are not considered creative enough. They're just not original enough or new enough. And they're not wrong. In the research, creativity is defined like that too. However, when I was doing my own study, I thought that those definitions were not inclusive enough. They were only focusing on one or two aspects of creativity and not expanding into anything else, such as culture. I wanted to know if culture influenced the way people define creativity. So, with the help of my research advisor and lab members, we collected data of over 200 college students to the questions that you see here in the screen. After that, we analyzed the responses through a thematic content analysis, which is just a fancy way to say that we looked at the responses and found similar themes and patterns in order to come with the map that you see here. We concluded that the way people think about creativity has to do with how they navigate four main things. The first one is context, which is kind of like our background. It's a mixture of our culture, heritage, traditions, used together with ideas of our generation and current environment. The second one is self-expression. It's the way we choose to express those ideas to the world. It could be through a beautiful art piece or the public speaking, like I'm doing right now. The second one is cognitive process, the way we think and process information. And finally, identity. Hoping that through this process, we can find our own authentic voice. We hope to use this map in the mental health field in order to come up with better solutions, ones that can be tailored to the individual, instead of trying to solve everything with a one-size-fits-all approach. If we learn anything through this experiment, is that all of us in this room have a little bit of creativity. It just depends on how we are navigating this context. Or, like one of our participants said, creativity is such a broad thing that it just cannot be contained. Thank you.
Our fifth presenter is Angela Madison. Her presentation is titled Soil Bacteria and Ant Interactions with Fava Bean. She's studying for her Master's of Science in Biology with Dr. Kane Keller.
So there are many types of interactions in nature. The ones we most often think about are the really dramatic ones, like the predator-prey interactions or the parasitic ones. But there are also many cooperative interactions as well. And these are called mutualisms or mutualistic interactions. And these are where both parties benefit from having a relationship with each other. And of course, in nature too, organisms aren't interacting with just one other organism. They're interacting with a lot. And when you have multiple of these interactions, you can have some interesting consequences. For example, if you have two interactions and they're cooperative with each other as well as with the host, all three will get additional benefits, and you'll see a lot more benefit from those interactions. However, if you have two interactions and they're competing against each other, say for like a limited resource, this can actually, the host will see reduced benefit, or even it could harm them depending on situations. The plant I'm looking at is the winter-loving fava bean, and this one has two interactions with some kind of curious consequences. So one of them, on the top right, is with the soil bacteria, and it'll house this bacteria inside little bubbles in its roots. And this bacteria will give additional nutrients to the plant that can be actually kind of hard to find in the soil sometimes. Its other interaction is with ants. And the plant will provide a special nectar that the ants will come and in exchange will hang around on the plant and defend the plant against anything that wants to eat it. And they're pretty fierce. And curiously, previous research by Dr. Kane Keller here at CSUB, on the bottom right, he found that when plants have this relationship with the soil bacteria, the ants prefer these plants a lot more. And there's something about these plants that's more favorable, and it's beneficial to the plant because they have more ants and they get more defensive benefit. And the question is, why? And thus far, we don't know. And this is where my research comes in. So my prediction is that because the soil bacteria provides additional nutrients to the plant can afford a higher quality nectar, and this is what will attract the ants. And so I'll be going the fava bean in a couple of different soil conditions, altering the soil nutrients and the soil bacteria, and I'll be looking at the nectar composition. Will it increase the amino acids or the sugar, which are two things that ants look for when they're searching out a food source. And then I'll also look to see which ones these ants find more favorable. And this research has, it has implications in agriculture, as this is a common agricultural plant. Also in pest management, because these ants are such good defenders of agricultural crops. As well as, most importantly, the more we understand about how organisms interact, the better we can help them and the better we can protect them when they need our help.
Our sixth presentation is from Rosa Rascon. Her presentation is titled Borrowing from Shakespeare, Intertextuality in Louise Erdrich's The Round House. She's studying for her Master of Arts in English with Drs. Monica Ayuso and Charlie McQuarrie.
According to Amnesty International, American natives and Alaskan Native women are 2.5 times more likely to be raped than any other women in this country. And in at least 86% of the cases, survivors report that the perpetrators are non-Native men. This happens because the federal government fails to provide the resources that these communities need. And also because the courts, the tribal courts, are denied the right to trial any of these cases of rape. They can only try some cases that are minor. This is why, in my thesis, I argue that Louise Erdrich, in her novel, The Round House, borrows from Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus. This is a play critics consider a melodramatic failure because of its gruesome scenes such as the rape of a beautiful princess named Lavinia. After the rape, her hands are cut off and her tongue is mutilated so as to silence her. Similarly, in The Round House, Geraldine is also raped, doused with gasoline, and nearly burned alive. The perpetrator is also non-native men, who callously rapes her in a sacred place natives called the roundhouse. Months pass before she can even name her rapist. I believe that through these allusions, Erdrich is calling our attention to Titus Andronicus because it was in Shakespeare's era that the English began their appropriation and disregard of the rights of the native nations. And also because there is an allusion in the play to Philomel. She's a lesser character from Greek mythology in Ovid's Metamorphoses, who is also raped like Lavinia. I feel that Erdrich wants us to know something that has been happening for too many times, and nothing is done about it. And also, this is such a grave situation that there's a graphic novel among Native Americans called, "What Do I Tell My Daughter When She's Raped?" Not if, but when. These women are somebody's mother, sister, and daughter. Wouldn't you do something about it if this were happening to your own daughter? Me too.
Our final presenter is Jacob Spritzer. The title of his presentation is Using Natural Tracers to Determine Sources of Water Sources of Woody Plants. His program is Master of Science in Biology, and his advisor is Dr. Brendan.
Atmospheric carbon dioxide has increased by almost 50% since the start of the Industrial Revolution. And now the Earth is almost 2 degrees hotter. How will this affect plants' access to water? How will this affect ecosystems around the world? For my thesis, I plan to study how plants access water throughout the year and how they may be affected by a hotter planet. The shrubs in the Southern California shrubland are very diverse, and they have some major differences, including their rooting depth. And because of this variation, they grow their roots deep or not so deep, and they access water differently, and they respond to drought differently. Now, some of these shrubs may be heavily reliant on very shallow soils that are replenished by rainfall, while others may tap into very deep, stable sources such as the water table. Now, you can see here that the most recent drought has had a large impact on some of these shrublands, and some survived while others have died off. Now, why is this? I think this is because of a heavy reliance on shallow soil layers that aren't replenished by rainfall. To test this, I plan to study the chemical composition of the water in the environment and compare it to those within the tissues of these plants. So elements are the fundamental substances that make up all matter, and varieties of these elements are called isotopes. And some of these isotopes are very unstable and highly radioactive, like uranium, and some are very stable, like oxygen-18 and hydrogen-2. They make up water, and they can be used as natural tracers to see how resources flow through ecosystems. And because they're a bit heavier and a bit different and more rare than their cousins, they change. You can see an isotopic signature change in the soil as you go deeper. Now, for my research, I plan to take samples from the environment, such as rainwater and water from the soil, and analyze the isotopic signature of this water. And then I'm going to take the water that's in the tissues of these plants and see how these compare to the environment. Now, using these isotopic signatures, we can infer where these plants are getting their water from, which soil layers. So, in conclusion, I hope to learn more about how these plants are going to survive on a hotter planet. Thank you.
So that is our 7 competitors. I'd like you all to thank yourselves and our competitors for such a great event. paused in between each presentation for our judges to score each presentation. The judges are using 4 criteria: comprehension, content, engagement, and communication. On today's presentations, the criteria that's being used to score them is the same criteria that will be used for the Western Association of Graduate Schools competition. So everyone's getting scored on the same criteria that will be used when our representative is at the WAGS conference in Albuquerque this March. If you don't mind, please, waiting a few minutes for the judges to finish scoring this last presentation. We will tally the scores and we will introduce our winner today. If you'd like to grab something to drink or something to eat, you're welcome to do so, or you can just wait patiently to see the outcome. Thank you for being here. This is so exciting! I am very pleased to present the winner of the first annual CSUB Grad Slam competition in December 2019 is Angela Madison. CSU Bakersfield at the Western Association of Graduate Schools' 4th Annual Regional 3MT Competition to be held in Albuquerque, New Mexico this March. So congratulations, Angela. Congratulations, all competitors. You did an outstanding job, and I really appreciate your time and commitment to this process. Angela, is your advisor here?
No, he's not here.
Oh, dang. Dang. All right. Well, congratulations, especially, I want to say, I want to really thank Dr. Stokes, Dr. Pratt, and Dr. Jacobson for being here. These are 3 professors from our biology program. We see our biology program was well represented today, and I appreciate your nudging them to participate. I think this was really fun and educational for all of us. Thank you all. Please enjoy some refreshments. Thank you, judges. I really appreciate your time. And have a good weekend, everybody.